Good morning and welcome to Coffee with the Callers. I'm Father Doug and I'm here with
Father James.
And we are right on the brink of Advent.
Oh my goodness, it's this weekend. Padre, we put up the Advent wreath today.
Oh, very good.
Are you putting one up on your desk?
I don't know. I need to go into collect some branches and
Here's
weave
what I
them
think you
together,
should do.
I guess.
Go over to Miss Pilar in the art room of the school and have her help you fashion one out of some, maybe you could use, when I was a kid, we used to use oatmeal.
Yes.
We would make the oatmeal with green food coloring and put red hots on the green wreath that we formed out of the oatmeal, and those were the berries in small candles.
I see.
And we put, maybe I'll make one for you.
Maybe.
You might show up to work one day and
There'll be
find
a glob of oatmeal on my desk.
It's going to be magnificent.
That'd be very festive. So we are talking this morning about an important facet of the Christian life, our love of neighbor.
Yeah.
And of course, we know that the greatest commandment is to love the Lord our God with heart and soul and mind and strength. But Jesus said the next commandment after that was to love our neighbor as ourselves. So what does that mean, really?
Yeah, I go back to St. Bernard of Clairvaux. He was a Cistercian monk who lived in the 1200s, and he had this really interesting notion called the 4 stages of love. That the very most basic stage of love is that you love yourself for your own sake.
Yeah.
Then one level up in maturity from that would be that you love God for your own sake. This would be like a little kid who says, Lord, I love you, you're amazing, now can I have the red bike? The next level of love that Bernard talks about is that you love God for God's sake. This should be like being in adoration, and God's up there in the monstrance, and you're just looking at God, and He's over there, and you're here, and you're like, I love you, God, for your sake. But really, the most mature level is the 4th level. It's where you love yourself for God's sake. So when I think about loving neighbor, I think of it in that way, that why would we love people that we don't even know? We love them because they're children of God. We love them for God's sake.
Yeah, I think that brings up a interesting point about when you're trying to love your neighbor. If your love of neighbor is founded in your love of God, and you love your neighbor because he's a child of God, and you want him to glorify God forever, that means your love of your neighbor doesn't have to be founded in like your emotional connection with your neighbor, or the fact that you like your neighbor's personality, or something like that. It's on a firmer foundation than that.
And sometimes you don't like your neighbor's personality.
Exactly.
On occasion, people get on your nerves, right?
Yeah, sure.
It happens
absolutely.
to me as well.
It happens to everyone, I think. So, I mean, one practical thing that means is when you have somebody that you're trying to love who's maybe hard to love, who's difficult, who's getting on your nerves, you in a certain sense, you don't have to be so worried at first about how you feel about that situation. You can say, well, I love this person for God's sake. I'm going to do acts of kindness for this person.
It almost becomes a veneration of God by loving God's creation, by taking care of God's person. So I even think to myself, like, we're driving down Burnett Road, and sometimes, you're at the stoplight, and the last thing you need is somebody to come up and ask you for something. Someone who's really struggling with life, and they need some help. And so they're, posted up on the corner of Anderson and Burnett Road, and you think, oh, goodness. But in reality, our call is to love that person for God's sake, as an act of worship to God by loving God's creation. Also what's interesting when we think about that, and this goes for everybody, do you know that everybody that gets that we struggle with, maybe, whether it's at work or in our families or someone that we're just not getting along with, every one of those persons was a beautiful baby once. And they say, oh, look how wonderful this beautiful baby is. And then they grow up. And so the reality of it is everyone is a child of God.
Yeah,
everyone, even the ones that irritate us.
Yeah, everyone was a baby once, and everyone may be one day a saint in the glory of heaven that we'll share all eternity with. So that kind of affects our view.
Yeah, so let's think about that as we now enter into Advent time. And maybe like Lent, we can take on maybe a devotion for Advent. Not in the same way that we do for Lent, but maybe just in a special way for Advent. And maybe this could be your devotion to say, everybody I see today, I'm going to see them as a child of God, and I'm going to love them as an act of worship of God. I'm going to love them for God's sake. So hopefully this strikes a chord with you, and it helps you to think deeper about love of God and love of neighbor. Looking forward to see you on Sunday. Have a great weekend.